Right, let's start. So, first of all, I wish everyone a happy New Year. Have a restful Christmas break. And welcome to our external auditors. Thanks, it's all online. Thank you. Please reminder to switch off your mobiles or put on silent. Yeah, maybe don't leave them on the silent. Check the weather. Or, the meeting is being recorded and available on YouTube shortly. And those that online and here, please project your voices clearly. I got a cold, so there's something you can all hear me. It's 4 meetings, so please use titles and not Christian names. That's all the other thing. Right, let's start. Apologies for absence.
I've received bodies of council appointment, Chair.
Thank you. To approve the correct record of minutes of the meeting held on 14th of November 2023, attached pages 7 and 14. Can I have a proposal?
Yeah.
Yes.
I did propose, I did brought it up and I didn't see it recorded. Was the request under the report section for a report that would give us information for waste and recycling, ideally per ward or per parish. So that request was made, it wasn't recorded in the minutes.
Okay.
I think it's mentioned in the minutes, isn't it?
I didn't see it. I might have missed it.
I'll pick that up in preparation for a future agenda.
But is this an amendment to the minutes?
Yeah, but also I should pick that up. Thank you. Seconder, closer, seconder, thank you. All in favour? Against? Abstention?
I wasn't here for the
Discussion, thank you. Good, that's, any declarations of interest? Thank you. To agree the agenda be parts A and part B, I think I let my notes out, but slight change to item number 10. We will meet our new external auditors at the next agenda item, next agenda in March. It's always next. So proposer, secretary for proposer for to agree the parts A and B. Secretary. Thank you. Right, moving on to the detailed report of our external auditors. Sorry. A quarter update of planning processing times. I think you got it on your desks in front of you. I think this came off the agenda a few meetings ago. I think following some concerns or wanting clarifications. I think we are seeing some improvements with the applications processing. This data now goes to Strategy and Resources and to Full Council. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So what I'm not proposing that we have this as a future agenda item unless it is called in by members here and discussed later. Any concerns about that? Any objections?
I was wondering whether there were any targets for where these figures, where we would, as an organisation, would like these figures to come to, specifically with the extensions.
There is no target in relation to the extensions. There are the national targets, but the national targets allow local authorities to agree extensions. And what we've seen with the most recent planning changes that have been introduced is that the government is considering issuing a consultation on introducing further changes to try and discourage the use of extensions of time. But they've not issued that consultation as yet. From our point of view, or from my point of view anyway, the most important statistic really is the average time to determine applications. And that's the end-to-end time That's the time measured from when the application is registered to the date when the decision notice is issued. And that's the one where I've asked the team to focus on, to ensure that we see a reduction in that average time. We won't always see it, obviously, but the trend, I hope, will be for that to be reduced.
If I understand it, a normal application for a normal member of the public, because I think that's where I would like to see us progressing most, because they're our end user, rather than going through a detailed application with the developer, which is going to take more time, is that we try and hit the target of 12 weeks, I believe, which is 3 months for determination, which is what we advertise on our website. And I'd like to see that 90% are done within that 3 month period that we advertise. Just so people's expectations are managed. That'll also help the local economy, because people who are putting an extension on a house are likely to employ a local builder. So we can help out in our own way just by streamlining that process. And probably for domestic applications, I'd also like to see below 10% request for extensions. That's me personally. I'm happy to put it on the table if we're allowed to make a resolution, but I think that for the fairly basic applications, I think that we can do that for an extension of a house. You know, if somebody's putting a sun lounge on, we don't want to get them to wait until the week before they get non-determination before they have their answer. It'll also increase people's happiness in the home, and then that might reduce some of the level of stress, which the financial problems that so many people are feeling during the present economic climate, which may again knock on to keeping families together rather than needing to split families and therefore potentially having the knock on of homelessness.
Can we keep starting? So, I mean,
If I'm allowed to make a proposal, I'd
Yeah.
like to make a proposal that for normal domestic applications, that they are concluded within the 3 months which we advertise on our website, and that extensions for that type of application, which is the householder, drop to below 10%.
May
yeah, so,
I would urge caution against introducing that as a target. The target or the measure that we've introduced, which is to measure the end-to-end time and to push the team to start reducing that end-to-end time, is a much better approach than introducing a target to say, right, you will now get every application out within 12 weeks, because we will get every application out within 12 weeks, but they might not be the best decisions. Because in a lot of applications, we might not even hear back from the county council as a consultee within those 12 weeks. So you do need to be really careful about introducing that as a measure. The end-to-end time is the measure that will show us whether we are improving on our overall performance in terms of time. The last thing we want to be doing is issuing decision notices because they're close to the 12 weeks and members have told us not to agree extensions of time, and just getting the decision out there, because it might not necessarily be the right decision or a good decision. So I would urge that we look at the end-to-end time, see how that goes. Like I said, there may well be a consultation from government about extensions of time, in which case we can prepare for that. But to introduce a target now, to come into effect tomorrow, if you like, with our own team saying, right, no more extensions of time beyond the 12 weeks, I think is asking for trouble.
and also understand sometimes it's lack of appropriate data from the applications.
Yeah.
Sometimes it holds it up, so a lot of time it's so they've not filled the form correctly or I'm revising all the detail.
Yeah, and if you've got an application that needs a section 106 agreement attached to it, then that's always going to go beyond the 12 weeks.
Mr. Jenkins, clarification, I did say only domestic applications, so that wouldn't cover the 106. That was for our parishioners just wanting to make their house more livable. And those likes, we could say that in 6 months' time, we'd like just those minor domestic applications, not a major one. If somebody wants to put a conservatory on, we know they're almost always going to get a single story extension. So this isn't the big ones which take a lot of resource. It's prioritising our customers, as I see them, the people who vote for us, the people who live in our area, not the big developers with 106 and things like that. I'm just trying to make people's livable life better.
Can I also clarify that strategy resources are now monitoring the performance of these targets?
Mhm.
And so I think it's appropriate that we could forward our observations on, I'm not appropriate, it's at that committee and we can call it in if things aren't approved. What your views might be on that?
You can do, yeah. I mean, the strategy resources, full council will get are getting the quarterly performance reports. And the end-to-end times and the planning performance is part of that. We are measured against the national indicators, and those national indicators do allow for extensions of time at the moment. That may change in the future, but we are going beyond that by measuring our end-to-end times,
Yes.
which reflect the actual time taken to determine a planning application, whether within the 12 weeks or with the extension of time. And we are pushing the team to start reducing that and start acting on those end-to-end.
I mean, I'm personally concerned, but as Councillor Woodville has, Councillor, blank,
It was good.
Heather Street, yeah.
I
Just
want
great.
to ask- Sorry, thank you. I just want to ask Chair if we, how we do against national averages.
I haven't got the figures for the national average, but regionally, we perform very well. It would be wrong of me in a public meeting to say exactly where we are on the scale, but I know from the last figures that I looked at, we were certainly top quartile.
And that is reassuring thing, that's really good there, but. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, looking at the figures, I would say that, I mean, you've got 38% determined within, not ignoring the large ones, because there's always those that mean you have to give extensions of time. But the determined within 8 weeks will be your single story, simple extensions that you can basically turn around and go, yeah, that's only comes to planning because it's been built in front of the house or something like that. And whereas, because your conservatories and your single story extensions at the back don't need planning anyway. So I would imagine that the rest of them are slightly more complicated, with slightly more complicated ones, because even householders put in complicated planning applications. It's not just major developers. So I mean, I think that hoping that the planning, not hoping, but expecting the planning department to reduce their average time down is the right way to go. And 24 weeks is at the moment is too long. We know that, they know that, they're well aware of where they are. And I think that to be able to actually see positive outcome with good outcomes for people who are putting in planning applications as well as for the council is much better way to go. And it's no good giving planning permission for something that is not right. So I think that the method of determination is the length of determination average should be the measure that we use.
And the figures showing Chris Jones.
So is the 8 weeks, is that a government, that's a target?
It's 8 weeks for minors, 16 weeks for majors, but the target is 8 weeks or within an agreed extension of time, or 16 weeks or within an agreed extension of time.
Because I'm being quite open, so when I'm contacted and people, I'm just being open that there's delays. And the fact is if only 38% of applications are being delivered within that 8 weeks, and we know that most of the time there's a conversation and there's an extension is agreed to, or it gets right to the last minute, and we've got somebody that naffed off because suddenly the officer's going back and saying we now need an extension. is there not something we should be doing in terms of communication? If we're only delivering 38%, do we need to just be open? Are we being open and honest that we're aiming for 8 weeks, but the reality is, because of the resources that we currently have, there are delays. So just managing people's expectations. Because if you give someone 8 week lead time for a product, they're going to be upset when they arrive in 10 weeks. So are we managing that communication if we are only achieving 38% in that time frame?
I imagine part of the challenge is how many applications. I mean, we've got a lot of them, and the market is quite quiet.
Yeah, does that when that letter goes back to them saying thank you for submitting, we're now dealing with it. Does that letter say we aim for 8 weeks, but we achieve this we achieve this most of the time, but we want to be open that there could be a delay.
I think it says 12 weeks on the letter.
Yeah, I'm not sure what goes back with the initial letter, but during the course of an application, there is contact between the planning officer and the agent or the applicant. And I would hope, and I'm not going to say it happens in 100% of cases, I would hope that during the course of those conversations, if it becomes apparent that extension of time is going to be required, because, I don't know, we haven't heard back from the county council or EA or whoever it might be,
Yeah.
then there will be that early discussion. I know that doesn't happen in every case, and there have been cases where it gets to the wire and suddenly an extension is agreed. But I hope that the norm is that during the course of the discussions about the application, during the course of those 8 weeks, if an extension of time is required, then there will be a request for it and hopefully a granting of that extension. As part of the normal discussions between the two parties.
It's as long as that's happening, because I just think it's about managing expectations, isn't it?
Yeah.
As long as I'm confident that the team are doing a great job of trying to do the best they can with the resources and the amount of people that they have. But sometimes there's a bit of misunderstanding because somebody gets frustrated. But if we can manage that early, then that's also then adding more pressure to the officers. That's something getting grumpy calls or pressure from us. So
Personally speaking, and it's only a personal view, that's why I don't agree with the government's targets. Because I think it drives the wrong behaviours. Because I suspect even if the government remove the extension of time provision and just say you must determine applications within 8 weeks or 16 weeks, if you mapped out when applications are determined, you will find the majority of them be determined on 7 weeks and 6 days or 5 days. Just the human nature of it. And that's why I think the average time to determine an application and seeing the trend of that hopefully going down is far more useful measure than how many you get out within 8 weeks or 12 weeks or 16 weeks, whatever it is. Because what we should be doing, if we're taking this to the perfect position, if you like, is getting the application determined in the right way and getting the right decision made as quickly as possible. That's what we need to aim for. Not just getting as many applications out the door in 12 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is, because like I said earlier, that will drive incorrect behaviour, which would be just getting them out the door and not necessarily the right decision being made.
Right. So Councillor Mitchell, you stressed his 3 month target for domestics or
Can
small.
we say that's the target of the target? So we would like to see that happen. Maybe 6 months' time, but my feeling is that we need to direct slightly more resources into that department. And by us making these targets and saying to strategy and resources, look, this is somewhere we need to focus on, that I think that it will allow our senior management team, hopefully, some more resources to help that department. I think everybody's working very hard in the department. I think that they're overstretched. And we need to help the economy, we need to help our parishioners, and we need to help our officers if they are overstretched. And the only way we can do that is by saying this is where we'd like to see. And strategy and resources, I'm happy to refer to them, that they consider increasing the level of resources to achieve the targets which I put out, which are only what we offer on our website. You know, I'm not asking for something that people aren't already thinking they're going to get when they go into the process. And that might be a way of helping our senior management team and the planning department. That's my thinking.
Could the wording be something along the lines that we want to see improvements? And to reduce the timescale. And if need be, consider the resources allocated to the department. And pass that through to strategy and resources.
It may help, Chair, if members know that we did apply for some funding through central government.
Right.
I can't remember what the fund was called now. But it was a fund set up by government to assist planning authorities in clearing backlogs. And we secured 75,000, I think it was, in funding, which will help us. I think 25,000 of that is for training and 50,000 of it is for bringing in some additional resource to clear any backlogs. So we're looking at a plan at the moment to see how that can be spent. And when we talk about improvements, what I'd say is, in future reports, what we'll ensure is that we see not just the current figures, but the previous figures. So if you compare these figures with the previous figures, for instance, on minor applications, when they came to you last meeting, it was 32%, it's 38% now. On major applications, the average time to determine them was 55 weeks before, it's 45 at the moment. Now that will fluctuate depending on demand, etc. But the team are trying to improve. They are focused on those end-to-end times. And by all means, make a recommendation to strategy and resources about resources in planning. But my opinion is that we've got sufficient resources there. And I think we will struggle to find further room in the budget to increase the establishment within the planning team or many other teams.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Just to add to what Chief Executive said, when we set the budget for the 22-23 year, we increased the number of posts within the planning department. So we actually built capacity building back into the planning department with 4 extra posts, so 2 deputy planning officers and 2 planning officers. So the establishment actually has had 4 additional posts since 2022-23. We've already talked in the previous committee about the challenges we've faced in terms of recruiting to some of the posts. The budget and the establishment does have the additional resources built in. So just to reassure members that the establishment, we feel, has sufficient resources. The challenge we have is making sure we can recruit into those posts and obviously increasing the efficiency and the turnaround of the applications.
And just to complete that picture, we've currently got 4 vacant posts in.
That is the challenge. I think it's a challenge, really. So,
Could I just ask for clarification? The extensions that they ask, that we ask, is their sole purpose just to move the period of non-determination on so we have more time? Because at the moment, if a normal planning application should be determined within, I believe, 6 months, otherwise there's non-determination. Whoever put the application in gets their planning carte blanche, regardless of what it is, and they get their planning feedback. So is the extension, because the extension seems to be retrospective. They get to the end of the time, they ask for an extension rather than it's something that is negotiated with the person who's got the application in. So it would seem to me that it would be naive if the person wanted to progress with whatever their extension is, for them ever to agree to an extension, because that's just kicking the can on for non-determination. Whereas if they just sit on their hands, they can wait the 6 months out, they get their money, their fee back, and they get their planning regardless of how ludicrous it is. Is that correct? Is that why we asked for extension?
I think the challenge, we've not got the head of service here, have we? And I'm sure you could look.
The reason for an extension of time, and it's always agreed with the applicant. If the applicant says no, then the extension isn't granted. So if the applicant agrees to the extension of time, then it changes the determination date. You're right. It changes it from 8 weeks to the date that is agreed with the applicant.
And I do understand that if the applicant doesn't agree in the first instance, they will get asked further times.
If they don't agree to an extension, the extension isn't granted. It has to be granted with.
But then they get asked again a little while down the road if they'll do an extension.
If it's,
But what you're saying is if people want a quick planning application to go through, say no to the extensions and get a non-determination. And that isn't going to get us good applications either,
No.
because the people are going to get whatever's in there and the officers aren't going to have any input. So that's why I'm saying we might be more resources, but I think we need to have a line in the sand that we're aiming at rather than we just need to do better. Because the number of report cards I've got from school is
Thank you, Chair.
good try hard.
I think that's a Jones.
It's clear that there is a line of the sand which is 8 weeks. I understand the point you're making.
I was saying 12 weeks.
Right, there is a current line of the sand which is 8 weeks, and the chief executive made it really clear there's 4 vacant positions. So all those positions are vacant, of course the people are going to struggle, but once those positions are hopefully filled, we'll have a much better understanding of what the capability, capacity of the team is. And then that's probably a sensible place to then review where the situation is.
And we're finding that it's hard to fill the posts due to the remuneration packages which the people are getting.
Well, we're covering
Because they're
part of
getting
it.
better remuneration packages from other, maybe London councils.
We're covering part of that later on under the relocation package, but we have discussed already in previous meetings the work the council are doing to improve this. I personally think that this is something strategy resources should be looking at. And if we are, as governments, are not happy with the progress that they're making, we should discuss it again. But Councillor Bashir, you table post, would you want to withdraw it or do you want to save it again?
I'd like to table the strategy and resources outline a way forwards and the targets which they see correct, or what they would like to see, so different councillors, the people over here, and have that back. Have we got time to bring it to our next governance meeting? So we can discuss that, and then maybe I shall table my original
That's it.
proposal.
More reasonable.
Chair, the Q3 performance reports
Yes.
go to February's strategy and resources meeting.
Yeah.
Strategy and resources members will debate what's in that report, which will be the financial information and obviously the performance information, which includes the planning information that's in front of you here. Obviously, strategy and resources members considered those key performance indicators and targets and actuals as part of setting up that new programme reporting last year. They were comfortable with the information they were receiving in the format they were getting. If you feel as a governance committee you want to refer that to strategy and resources to reaffirm that, so that can be done as part of that report that goes. The output from that can come back to your March governance committee meeting. So if you feel there is an area within that report that you want strategy and resources to reaffirm what they want to see being reported, at that meeting, they will also receive the draft budget for 24-25, which will include the resources for each of the service areas of the council. That will include planning. The planning manager has reassured us as part of the draft budget, it's been compiled to date, the establishment and the number of posts that are in there are of sufficient level to deliver the planning service. So I can assure members that there has been no ask for additional resources. The challenge is obviously making sure we can fulfil those vacant posts. Certainly members of strategy and resources can look at the performance information that's within that report and refer that back to governance in the March meeting.
The last thing I want us is replicate what's happening elsewhere. So,
But yeah, if we ask them to consider whether the staffing budget could be increased, but not the
Well,
number of
I
posts.
think more agree that we listen to the appropriateness of the salary.
Yeah, and ask them where they would think a fair target for a number of weeks for a domestic application should be, because of their strategy and resources, they need to know where they're heading and they need to know what resources they can give. And the 4 vacant posts is not going to help the situation. If we need to adjust the packages in order to do that, albeit even in the short term, I think that should be a consideration of theirs, and we should point them to the
Sorry, just to close down, okay, but I appreciate it. But we've all jointly agreed that strategy resources have already looked at these indicators. No, they look at it.
Yes, so when the new reporting was coming through in 23-24, Strategy and Resources had already looked at the performance measures. They were comfortable with the measures that were coming through. We've also, obviously, considering the draft budget for next year, which looks at all of the resources, as I've already reaffirmed, planning manager is happy with the establishment level. Obviously, she would like to go out and fill those vacant posts.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the strategy to try to fill those. Part of that is also looking at how we advertise those posts and how we make them, obviously, opportunity for people to apply for them. That's the challenge. I don't think the challenge is to increase the resources further because she is happy with the level of resources she's got. So I think the resourcing side fulfills part of how we bring the budget to you next month. I think the issue that you're raising is around is the performance data and the targets that are in that report, are strategy and resources members comfortable with those? And having fed back from this meeting to strategy and resources, we can ask that question and we can then report back from strategy and resources to your March governance meeting, the report back then from strategy and resources.
It does concern me that they're happy with the way things are, and
Well, so,
because it is upsetting members of our community.
yeah, I think we've got it.
Another annoyance for the members of the community is the portal website, but I believe that is dictated to us by the government.
The planning portal is central government.
Yes, I've said that there's not a lot we can do there other than you having a dialogue with the
To
officers.
move this forward, then we need to get the wording right. Are we happy with wording that we request that strategy and resources confirm the appropriate resources and measures are sufficient? I don't know. Yeah,
So this is probably very oversimplified, but I've got here that the proposal is to ask the Strategy and Resources Committee to look at increasing staffing budget and for them to advise on a fair target that they think is correct for the processing of planning applications.
Yes.
That's very much from my
I
side.
think that's it.
So if you propose that, I assume you just need a.
what's to hang on one sec. Not to review the approach.
They're reporting that to us now.
Eric, can we not have some questions?
I'll just read that again, so.
Just check
within the
that councillor questions after this.
So to our Strategy and Resources Committee to review the appropriateness of the staffing budget for planning and advise of a fair target for the processing of planning applications.
Instead of start, can I say remuneration package or start?
Chair, if I may, we're jumping from one thing to the other.
Yeah.
You're talking about staff and budget, and now you're talking about the remuneration package.
Well, the remuneration package is their contract, though, isn't it? And
This item relates to the number of applications determined within
Yeah,
the 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. It doesn't relate to the remuneration package of officer. And I think we're confusing 2 or 3 different things here. If members wish to make a recommendation to Strategy and Resources that asks them to consider the planning budget and planning resources in the round when they're considering the budget at the next couple of meetings, that I think is appropriate. If members wish to ask Strategy and Resources to consider whether the measures are correct, then again, that's appropriate, although you just heard Mr. Trick say that no, they did consider this not that long ago. But those 2 things are appropriate. I think if you start asking members or Strategy and Resources and full council to look at the planning remuneration, we don't look at one section's remuneration in isolation from other sections. We evaluate posts across the council. So if we think planning posts, we'll be changing any number of other posts across the council. And I wouldn't suggest governance committee starts getting involved.
no. So, who's writing?
It would depend whether. To leave that one.
Okay.
I'm happy to disagree with our chief exec because I believe that the output figures could well be linked to the vacant posts within there, and the ease of filling those will do it. But I will allow the original wording to go through just
So
the simplest.
to me that, please again.
But that was the one that, that's why.
Yeah.
So I remove my word remuneration.
I think if our chief exec covers it, to ask Strategy and Resources Committee to review the appropriate staffing budget.
Do you want me to repeat myself, Chair?
That'll be easier.
I think it was to ask Stratton Resources to look at the planning resources budget in the round with the budget setting process, and also to consider whether the measures within the performance report are appropriate.
We make it more simple and just say the targets that we are aiming to get from the department, because otherwise it could be misinterpreted when it goes to strategy. I mean, if they're happy with 8 weeks and they believe those are achievable, then I'm very happy. I just wanted to step in the direction, otherwise we can revisit this.
No,
Did you want me to
read it.
read it back out? So that's for Ken, so please correct me if I do.
Let's check.
That we would ask Stratton Resources Committee to consider the planning budget in that, and in the budget setting process, and to consider the measures, sorry, to consider whether the measures in performance are appropriate.
It's not the measures, it's the end game of the target, which I would like to see that we are aiming at something.
Well, I think probably we're talking about the same thing. The measures that I'm talking about are the 8 weeks, the average time to determine an application and so on. So the figures that you've got here are the measures that I'm talking about.
Okay, as long as it's worded clearly when it goes to them, so they understand that that's what.
But have we got a second then? Yeah, right. It's good to have a dialogue. And thank you, Councillor Bishop. And thank you, officers, for that. Right, agenda item 7, external auditors. Fund report, 2022, 2023, pages 15 to 54. Audit grant.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So we have 2 reports on today's agenda. We have item 7, which is our audit findings report for 22-23, setting out the main findings for our opinion work. And we also have item 8, which is our auditor's annual report for 22-23, setting out our findings for our review of the council's VFM arrangements. As you can see, I'm joined today by Ros Appley, who is the manager for the opinion work, and also by Andy Nichols, who's the manager for VFM. And I will ask each of those shortly to introduce the respective reports. But perhaps before I do that, I just wanted to perhaps provide a bit of context to the high-level messages. So if I can start with item 7 and the audit findings report. I was first appointed as your external auditor in 1920. And given that this is our final year as your auditors, I thought it might be helpful for members of the committee to hear my reflection of the council's arrangements for producing complete, accurate and timely financial statements. And this is based on the last 4 years of audit. My reflection is that the council does have strong arrangements in place. The reports that I've issued over the last 4 years have generally been very positive, and in the main, there have been small errors identified with no material errors in any year. And that has actually enabled me for the last few years to sign off your accounts earlier than the majority of your peers. This year, it is slightly different in that we did have some challenges within our own team that I've referenced previously. We did have a resignation of our in-charge, which may resulted in us not being able to start the 22-23 audits as early as possible. But we are now, and I'm pleased to report, we're now very close to concluding. And once again, I am very pleased to be able to report that based on the work to date, we have not identified any material errors in those draft accounts presented for audit. So just turning to the report itself, recognising that overall observation about arrangements, you will see that on page 20 of your papers, at the time of drafting this report, we did identify a small number of areas of work outstanding, I'm pleased to be able to report that the majority of those outstanding areas have now been concluded, and there are no new issues that I need to bring to your attention. In fact, the only substantive area that is still outstanding is a little bit of work on land, buildings and investment properties, and we have received further information from officers since issuing this draft report that we are currently working through, and we are hoping to conclude that work early next week. So subject to that work being completed, it is our anticipation that we will issue a clean, unqualified opinion on your 22-23 accounts following their approval by full council on the 17th of January. And clearly a clean, unqualified opinion is what you want to receive as those charged with governance. So it's important that this report, which is very detailed and quite technical in nature, should be read in that context. So that's the overall message. I'll just now hand over to Ros, who will briefly take you through a bit more of the detail.
Thanks, Peter. So I will take the report as read, but I'm just going to go through and summarise some of the key audit findings from our work. So our audit work is undertaken on the basis of materiality, and this is what Peter will ultimately sign off to say that the accounts are true and fair and free from material misstatement. We have determined a materiality figure of 1.17 million as detailed on page 21 of your packs. This determination of materiality helps us to focus our audit testing on the material figures throughout the accounts. On page 22 of your packs, we detail our significant risks, and these are the areas that need special audit consideration and that ultimately a significant amount of our audit time is invested into the work in these areas. What I'm going to do is run through the findings from each of our 4 significant risk areas. So the first on page 22 is around journals and the risk of management override of controls in journals there. So from our detailed testing undertaken on journals, there was no issues identified in that work. However, as we have reported in previous years, there are no preventative controls in place around journals authorisations, and journals can be both posted and authorised by the same person. There has been some retrospective controls put in place by the council, such as review of those journals over 10,000, but this is still one of our control recommendations that is detailed further on in our recommendations within the report. If we move on to the next page, the next significant risk is around investment properties. As Peter previously touched on, our work in this area is largely complete. We are just finalising the final pieces of evidence now. To date, there are no issues to report or to bring to your attention in this area. If you move over to the next page, the next significant risk area is around the valuation of land and buildings. And this is the area that has involved a significant level of audit challenge this year to both the finance team, but also the valuers. From this work, the areas of work that are outstanding still are around DRC assets. So these are assets that are valued on a depreciated replacement cost basis. We have had significant conversations around the valuation of these assets. We have identified that the valuation for these assets was done using a blanket 8.6% uplift, and we haven't necessarily easily been able to evidence that 8.6% to asset specifics that consider things like location factor. We have now, as Peter mentioned, been able to obtain audit evidence to largely support these valuations, but we have raised a control recommendation that in the future the council should ensure that there is sufficient appropriate audit evidence readily available to support the valuations, and that they also consider the unique characteristics and location of the assets. If we then move on to page 25, the final significant risk area for us is the net pension liability there. So that's the 14 million liability within the balance sheet there. So at the time of writing this report, we detailed that there was no issues to report, but that we hadn't yet received the letter from Devon Pension Fund. This letter has now been received, and following receipt of this letter, there is no further issues to report here. So we can say that our work is concluded in that area with no matters to raise to your attention today. If we jump to page 41 of your packs, this details our recommendations that have come out of our audit work. So I've touched on a couple of these already, but we have raised 7 new recommendations this year. So I'm just going to summarise a couple of the key ones here. The 2 to draw your attention to are the ones at the bottom of page 41. So they're both in relation to Civica and our work that's been undertaken around IT general controls. We identified that, firstly, there was a lack of formal process in the use of the IT privileged account, and this therefore creates a risk of unapproved usage of the account, which can impact on data integrity. We also identified that in our review of user rights, that admin user rights on Civica are granted to members of the finance team who have financial responsibilities, and this therefore creates a segregation of duties, kind of conflict of interest there. So this is something that we recommend is reviewed in future years. If we move on to page 42, we also identified that there are a number of assets on the fixed asset register that have a 0 net book value. So they're having no impact at all upon the balance sheet, but they are still in use. So we do recommend that each year the council ensures that asset lives being allocated are appropriate, but also there is a review undertaken to ensure that if there are assets that are at a 0 value, should they be on the fixed asset register or should they be removed? The final point is just around some of our work in grant receipt in advance, where we identified that a grant had been recognised as a grant receipt in advance when in fact the monies had not been received. So in our view, this should not be recorded as a grant receipt in advance. It would merely be a debtor at year end if the conditions were as the council say they were. So it's just around ensuring appropriate treatment of grants receipt in advance moving forward. The effect of this was below trivial, hence it just being a control recommendation and not flowing through to an adjusted or unadjusted misstatement. If we then move to page 43, this looks at our prior year recommendations. So we had 3 recommendations that were raised in 21-22. 2 of these you can see have been fully actioned. One of these is still in progress, and that is the matter I've already raised around the journals issue there. So something that we've touched on previously. Finally, if we move on to page 44, this looks at our audit adjustments. The first thing to note is that we have not identified any adjusted or unadjusted material misstatements. We have, however, identified a number of small disclosure changes. One of these was within the figures disclosed on the face of the cash flow. Another was identified in relation to financial instruments, where we identified an amount of just under 500,000 was not appropriately treated in the debtor's financial instrument calculation. And the final was in relation to the pensions note, where the signage used within the note was not appropriate. And finally, there has been a number of small disclosure changes identified from throughout our work, but these are all very small matters that are purely presentational and are summarised in that final point there. That was everything we were going to go through there, but please, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ross. Just a clarification for councillors here. The valuation of assets seems to be a national challenge, well, that's the right word for it. So it's not just specific, correct, Ross, right, but it's not just about North Devon, it seems to be issue across lots of councils. Jake, have you got anything you want to add, or shall I open up to the?
I'm happy to pass over.
Oh, that's the council. There's a lot of thinking there, I appreciate, for all of us. A lot of work by auditors, a lot of work from our officers, we'll take the measure. Any questions? Councillor Bishop?
I think we should congratulate the teams
Yeah.
for getting this recommendation. And also, I'm guessing that the recommendations made within the report, it goes without saying that they will be actions and the advice will be followed, so we don't need to go through them specifically.
Yeah, correct. So the management responses that are in the report, obviously our management responses back to the auditors. We obviously accepted those recommendations that come forwards. As Ros alluded to, there is one where we talk about journals that, in a sense, we've always treated them that way. We do review journals over £10,000, so we're happy that there is sufficient control in place. We don't allow journals to be done outside of the finance team. They are done only within the finance team. Some councils do allow journals to be done outside within certain areas, so I'm happy and comfortable that control is in place. But we will continue to monitor that as we go forwards. But with all the other management recommendations, we accept those. And the outcome from tonight does go through to full council for all members to then obviously follow this through to the full accounts being approved next Wednesday.
So I'd like to minute the thanks. Well, thank auditors later on, but let's thanks to all the officers involved in supporting the audit. There seems to be some positive comments there about sort of the level of reporting was good and but yeah, we do appreciate all the work that they're doing. Mr. Jones.
Can I just bring your attention to page 68? Just in relation to our commitments in terms of.
Yeah, that's the next.
Yes, sorry, yeah, but we covered by the next. Sorry, yeah.
Let me jump back.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in the previous report, isn't it?
Want to come back? Or you still looking?
Can I jump forward as well? Report.
Sorry?
If it's going to be discussed, I'll wait. Yeah.
Thank you. So we don't need to, we need to go on that. No, it's noted. Thank you. Right, so we're on to the second. Item 8.
Thank you, Chair. So, as I said, this is the auditor's annual report that sets out the findings for our review of the council's arrangements to secure value for money in the use of its resources for the period 22-23. Value for money means lots of things to lots of people, but when it comes to local government, it's based on the National Audit Office Code, which requires us as auditors to focus on 3 areas. So the report contains judgments in relation to your arrangements for ensuring financial sustainability, the arrangements for governance and in particular decision making, and your arrangements for ensuring economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of your resources. Once again, before I hand over to Andy, I just wanted to really just focus on the main findings and perhaps start by referring members to actually the back of the report, so Appendix B, which is right at the back on page 83 of your papers. And I think this is quite important context because it sets out in this Appendix B the different types of recommendations that auditors can make to councils based on the nature of our findings. And you'll see at the top the most serious type of recommendation that the council can receive is a statutory recommendation. We do reserve these for the most serious concerns over arrangements in place at an audited body. You'll be pleased to know that you don't have any of those recommendations at North Devon. They do tend to be the nuclear option, but it is probably fair to say that they are becoming more frequent. And auditors are using a lot more of these now than they have done in the past, given the increased pressures that councils found themselves under. But clearly, there is nothing from that perspective to worry about at North Devon. So those are the highest level. The next level down are what we call key recommendations, and key recommendations are recommendations that arise when, on balance, we as auditors consider that the council does not have effective arrangements in place for value for money in one or more of those 3 areas I mentioned. And once again, I'm pleased to be able to report that you don't have any key recommendations in this report. And what that means is that overall, on balance, we consider that in each of those three areas, you do have effective arrangements in place, which is clearly very reassuring for members of this committee. And my wider reflection on this is that if I look across my portfolio of audits and the wider portfolio within Grant Thornton, there are a considerable and increasing number of key recommendations being made across a number of our councils across all levels, whether it be upper tier or districts. So that leaves then the lower level recommendations, and these are improvement recommendations, which are more to do with refining and strengthening arrangements that are already deemed to be sufficient. And in this report, you'll see that we've raised 4 improvement recommendations. And interestingly, we've not made any recommendations at all in the area of governance, which is quite an achievement. I don't think I've got any other councils that have had no recommendations in this area. And the other ones, as I said, they are more about refining what are deemed to be already satisfactory arrangements going forward. So once again, I know there's a lot of narrative there, and Andy will go through a bit of the detail, but it's a really positive message in terms of the overall conclusions that we've reached. So I'll just pass over to Andy now, who will go into a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Chair and Committee. So yeah, just to pull out a couple of highlights from what is, as Peter says, a pretty positive report overall. So as Peter said, the first of the areas we look at is arrangements around financial sustainability, which is really about how the council develops its financial plans and identifies the risks in the short and medium term that it faces and develops plans to mitigate them. And I think it's fair to say that those were put to a fairly stern test in 22-23, given the levels of inflation that this council, along with many others up and down the country, faced. I don't think I've come across a council yet that anticipated in full where inflation was going to go. I don't think anyone did, but it was pleasing to see that North Devon grasped the nettle of putting in place a robust plan to meet that challenge, including in this case a one-off use of reserves, the budget management reserve, before the year end and without delaying for the election as well, which showed that those arrangements to identify and mitigate risks were working effectively. In the end, the council's financial position was such that it was able to replenish that particular reserve, which was a good result as well. We do make a small number of improvement recommendations under this heading, which, as Peter says, are really about that sort of continuous improvement aspect of making sure that the arrangements don't stand still and continue to evolve to meet the challenges, the increasingly difficult financial challenges that this, as well as all of the councils face. And if there's a theme in those recommendations, it's just about ensuring that complete and total clarity and transparency over medium-term costs, medium-term funding gaps, and the savings plans that may need to be developed to meet those gaps. And I'm aware that one of the councillor has a question about one of those recommendations, which we'll come on to in a second. Governance, which looks at risk management, decision making and protocols and standards around behaviour and appropriate standards, as Peter says. Unusually, no recommendations in that regard. We raised a couple of recommendations in the prior year around just about small improvements to processes, and pleased to see that those have been implemented in full this year. So what that means is that in our view, the council has the arrangements it needs to make decisions effectively and to identify and deal with any issues in governance that it might identify. So it's about making the right decisions at the right time in the right way, and we didn't identify any weaknesses in that regard. Moving on to the third and final area, the 3 E's. I think this is sort of performance, procurement, and partnerships in a way. Mr. Trigg mentioned earlier the new performance management arrangements that the council put in place, and I think that's really worth highlighting as a positive. Actually, it's good to see a council putting in place a performance management framework that draws not just on kind of retrospective performance indicators, but also actions being taken to deliver key programs, which might be sort of leading indicators of performance as well. It makes it a bit more tangible and sort of forward looking. So it was good to see that being embedded through the year. No significant issues identified otherwise. One improvement recommendation noted, which is about, if I can summarise it, about ensuring that reporting on procurement and contract management activities is embedded into that performance framework, and that there is absolute clarity, including reporting to this committee over trends in any divergence from procurement regs and waiver activity, which is something that we, this is type of reporting that we see across a lot of councils. So there's an improvement recommendation for you there. So those are just some highlights from the report, and along with Peter, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor, do you have a question, Councillor Jones, or?
I did.
Yeah, thank you.
Before I get to that question, I think Officer Trigg may have already made a note on the response to it. But
What page you been asked for us?
I just want to say that I think many of us have got strong confidence in the financial leadership of this council. And when we read the report as we just have, and we hear the feedback that we have, I think that strengthens that confidence. So well done, thank you for those driving that part of the council. And yeah, I had a question which was on page 63. Apologies, because I failed to see that it went from one report to the other. Which it is about carbon neutrality. It points out the fact that we have a plan, but it also points out the fact that there's no budget supporting that plan. Obviously, we have the management response to that, but I just wonder if you can elaborate on actually the reality of achieving that plan, or where we sit. And the fact is, we have a plan, but we don't actually have a budget. So how do we achieve that?
We have some budget. So in the capital programme, there are specific projects that are coming forwards to reduce carbon impact. So we've had capital budgets for improvement of LED lighting in offices and council buildings. We're also bidding for savings grant funding for reducing carbon within some of our major assets, such as the Brooklyn Ball, Landmark Theatre, etc. So there are specific projects with capital budgets associated to them. I think it's right to say we have capital budget approved. What we don't have is a defined figure that says we've got £5 million in the capital programme for projects that will come forward. We need to see our projects that come forward with business cases so that we can consider the carbon reduction impacts it has, the financial benefits and also the non-financial benefits, and also what those financial costs are and how we can finance them. Because members need to consider that alongside other priorities around such as financial sustainability and making sure that we are resilient with our finances moving forwards. Which it would be, I think, irresponsible for us to set aside a large amount of capital programme if we can't afford that in the current financial climate. So it needs to be done in a balanced way. But as we can see, we do have specific capital projects, and we are looking for opportunities to fund those through other external measures, but balanced in the measure of also making sure we've got a sustainable budget moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Chair,
Yeah.
just a comment that it is obviously listed as a corporate risk that you don't have a defined programme or budget relating to achieving your net zero targets. That's one of the corporate risks.
We have a lead officer there. I don't know how far the plan's going, but I imagine there will be a report going to full council from that working group.
We had the report from the climate officer on the strategy and resources agenda on Monday, yesterday, which showed, and I can't remember the figures, I've got it in front of you now, like losing this one, but that showed that we had reduced our carbon footprint and carbon production. But a similar question, I think, was asked at the meeting. And I think it was framed in terms of, how realistic is it that we're going to meet our 2030 target for North Devon Council? And her response was that it would be extremely difficult to meet it, especially without carbon offsetting and the carbon offsetting schemes that are relevant at the moment. She wouldn't have confidence in those schemes and their ability to offset sufficient carbon for us to meet that target at the moment. And I think she gave the example of the trees that we've planted at Longmeadow Drive, and the extension to Woodland. I think we planted 25,000 trees or something like that. I can't remember the actual figure. I think she said something like 3,000 tonnes over the course of the lifetime of the woodland, which was basically a drop in the ocean as far as what we need to offset. So planting trees isn't going to be the answer. There's other offsetting opportunities that we need to explore and have developed through Biosphere and other agencies as well. So it's quite difficult to put a figure on it.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, like you said, the report that went Strategy and Resources reported our baseline is 2018-19, which was 3,952 tonnes of carbon dioxide. That reduced in 22-23 to 3,300 in the group. So there had been quite a significant reduction already. And also that's 22-23 data prior to us having made the changes to things such as LED lighting in our council assets. So we would expect then a further drop in 23-24. And the report that went to members also talked about some of the other things that we're doing, such as trialling vehicles for electrifying our fleet, etc. So quite a positive report, and I recommend members have a look at that report and went to Strategy and Resources on Monday.
Question, Felix. At one time, that was a loan. Is it still a loan, or is it free money now?
This is a grant now. So we've had some state grant funding to fund some of the surveys that we've now carried out.
Yeah.
The second round of bids that we're putting on now for capital enhancement within those major assets. So I can't recall the exact amounts, but I think one was around 400,000 and the second one was around 800,000 of capital funding. But it's all grant, not repayable loan.
And no match funding at all?
No match funding.
No.
Some small match funding from the tenants who are operating in those assets. So for example, Parkwood, who operate the pool, and Senator will operate the theatres. There's a small amount of match funding from themselves, but obviously they benefit because they're responsible for paying the utility bills within those buildings, so it repays itself very quickly.
Gosh, I've not read that report yet, but obviously that will for us to look at now, Strategy and Resources. Any questions on that?
I understand that the figures for carbon sequestering I mentioned was about 4 years ago. So far better if you're planting hemp, which can actually be used as a crop for making textiles. Maybe that needs to be looked into, because we do have land which I believe could grow that product.
Okay, well, we can feed that back to the local. I'm sure our experts are looking at all aspects, and we've got a lead councillor as well, haven't we? So okay, so thanks again to the officers. Great news about governance. I'm not sure we can get any credit for ourselves for that, but we are governance committee. And I thank, we've got on record, we've been put on a record for the officers, and also put on record our thanks for the, I'm not sure many years, that's also I've been working with them. But thank you for, I mean,
Didn't Peter say that he's on his 104th year?
thank you for the work. Thank you for your report. We might see you again. I'm not sure when the next cycle is, but.
Thank you, Chair, and just to say thank you for all the cooperation over the years. It's very much appreciated, and wish the council all the best for the future.
Thank you. I spent a lot of time reading these reports and not many questions. It's funny, questions go on certain reports, but we do appreciate that work you're doing. Thank you. Reassuring. Thank you. We don't need to, do we need to formally agree the report?
Yes. Just
Noted, thank you. So number 9, election representation.
Thank you, Chair. So members, obviously following on from the external audit reports that you've received, as I've alluded to, the full statement of accounts, the annual governance statement will come to full council next Wednesday for ratification. And then following that, it's the responsibility of this council to send a formal letter back to the external auditors, setting out that we've complied with all the appropriate regulations and also provided them with all the sufficient detail and disclosures that are necessary for them to conclude the audit. So the letter that's included in item 9 is what we call a letter of representation that we write on behalf of the council, that is signed following full council by the chair of the council and myself as chief financial officer, that sets out to Grant Thornton that we've fulfilled our responsibilities in terms of preparation of the accounts, and that we're satisfied that the material judgments and the preparation of those statements are soundly based in accordance with the code. The letter itself is standard and is the same letter predominantly that we send each year. The only change this year is on page 86, where we have added in some further narrative around equally pay claims. This has been something that has come up this financial year, but certainly with other authorities, most notably with Birmingham Council. And obviously, it's not something that we can ignore at this council. It's something that we've had to carry out some work on to make sure that we have complied accordingly. So we've just added some additional wording under point XI, which talks about any potential liability in respect of equal pay claims. We've considered that, and we've also satisfied ourselves that there's no liability that needs to be recognised within our financial statements, and that's set out in the grounds shown in sections A to D. That sets out that we've undertaken some work and analysed reports that break down by pay band and also by male and female split. And following that, plus the annual gender pay reporting that we submit on behalf of the authority, we conclude that there's no further work posed in that area. We're also not aware, either currently or historically, of any unauthorised patterns of working within the authority, also underlying some of the claims that have come forwards. We also use a recognised job evaluation scheme that is submitted to a panel of 3 trained job evaluators. Each of those panel members score posts, not individuals, therefore it's actually scoring a post rather than individual people. And finally, no equal pay claims have been submitted, and we're not aware of any potential equal pay claims at the current time. So therefore, we've made it very clear to the auditors that we've carried out a conclusive piece of work. It means there is no recognised liability on behalf of the council. As alluded to in the report from Grant Thornton and set out by Andy, we also updated our going concern assessment in terms of the ongoing financial sustainability of the council, and we also believe there's no further disclosures in relation to the council's ability to continue as a going concern. We've also provided the relevant information and made the appropriate disclosures to the auditors, and we've also satisfied ourselves that the annual governance statements that came to this committee back in June, and will also go on to full council next week, fairly reflects the risk assurance and governance framework, and we confirm that we're not aware of any significant risks that aren't already disclosed within that annual governance statement. This letter then will obviously go to full council next Wednesday for approval, and subject to member approval will then be signed by myself and the chair. We'll then go back to the auditors on Thursday morning, and at that stage, once they've concluded their final pieces of work, we should then receive the final written opinion from the auditors, which concludes the financial statements audit for the work. So, Chair, it's in front of members this evening just to confirm they're happy with that letter and make the recommendation for this letter to be approved by full council next Wednesday.
So we need to vote on this.
You, Chair.
Can I have a proposal, please? Secondary, all in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you. A gripe to take forward in the future about policies. We still call the chairman of the council, we're something like that in the future, about maybe a valid reason for that. Yes, that's.
Chair, can I just say something about that? It's, it was looked at quite a while ago.
Was it?
And, I believe that under the, local government
Yes.
rules, it is still referred to as
I know.
council, despite the fact that
No.
it's, it can be somebody of any
Or not, non-gender, yes, okay.
orientation that they were, that we were.
That's the inappropriate, but that's not an issue. Yeah. Right, so that was item 9, 10, they're not on the agenda, 11, appointment of cooperative members. That was triggered again, is it?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Members, item 11 follows a piece of work that's currently being carried out by the Devonport Partnership. And just a little bit of background, there was an independent review carried out by Tony Redmond back in 2019, 2020, that looked at the effectiveness of external audit and the transparency of financial reporting in local authorities. A link to that report is shown within your papers, and was published in 2020. One of the recommendations that came out of that report was to consider the appointment of at least one independent member to what they call audit committees, or in our case, would be a governance committee. Our constitution outlines the composition of the governance committee, together with the requirements and also the quorum of its membership. So therefore, depending on members' decision this evening, if you were to approve a co-opted independent member, then the constitution obviously would need to be required to be amended accordingly. So the review that was carried out in 2019 proposed legislation requiring audit committees to have at least one co-opted independent member. That's in addition to the elected members that obviously sit in the committee currently. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, which are known as CIPFA, and have subsequently issued guidance advising that the audit committees of local authorities should include co-opted independent members in accordance with appropriate legislation. Local authorities have looked at this in the past. Some local authorities have adopted it, and neighbouring authorities, Torridge, have had a co-opted independent member for quite some years. A number of authorities in Devon haven't. And also the challenge has been recruiting sufficiently qualified members to sit as an independent co-opted member. Devon Audit Partnership have been working with a number of Devon councils recently to look at recruiting new independent committee members. So rather than having one for each local authority, recruiting a pool of members that potentially could sit on those Devon authorities. So this report outlines proposals for this council to consider if it would like to appoint one independent member to its governance committee. I will make it clear it's not a statutory requirement to have one, but obviously it does follow the guidance and obviously following the report, which is known for the Revenue Review. That review that was carried out in 2020 outlined that whilst a vast majority of local authorities were supportive of the principle, at that stage only about 40% of those committees actually had done so at that stage. It had reported experience of having independent members, which did provide some useful challenge to the committee. Some authorities did report the effectiveness of independent members was hampered sometimes by their lack of knowledge in that specific area. So that has been a challenge, and that's obviously why Devon Audit Partnership have been working collaboratively with the Devon authorities. Devon Audit Partnership, just before Christmas, have advertised for such a role and are seeking people with no direct connection to councils' political groups to join their audit and governance committees. The co-opted members will sit alongside yourselves as elected members and aim to bring an informed and independent perspective. The role for independent members is set out in section 4.10, and that's the role that's been advertised by Devon Audit Partnership. And that's that they have a professional audit, accountancy or finance business management background, able to interpret and analyse data with a view to asking probing questions to reach rational conclusions, be a critical thinker, be confident and fully and proactively participating in the consideration of matters before the committee at its public meetings, and be a good listener, fair, unbiased and objective in their approach. Section 4.11 sets out that applicants must not be a councillor or officer of any of the councils or have been in the preceding 12 months, be related to or a close friend of a council or senior officer of local authority, must not have been convicted of any offence, must not be an undischarged bankrupt, must not have significant business contractual dealings with the councils, have a proven history of vexatious or frivolous complaints at any of the councils, or be in arrears of council tax, business rates, or have any outstanding debts owed to the councils. It's quite prescriptive in terms of the role that's been advertised through Devon Audit Partnership. They've advertised those posts and also set out that a proportion of the members and annual allowance or a fixed annual fee would be paid to the successful post holders. And subsequent to that, we have sought guidance from the Independent Remuneration Panel, recommend the allowances to this council that obviously recommended members' allowances at the last your council meeting. And that was recommended from themselves that the allowance, if members sought an independent member, to be £200 per year for the independent co-opted member. So the outcome from that recruitment exercise will obviously be concluded in the early part of this year, but hence this report coming to you this evening to determine whether you would like to go down the route of having a co-opted independent member. In terms of the ability for those co-opted members to have voting rights, that's a description that is set out in sections 415 and 416 of the report. And just to summarise, the Act establishes that members of committees appointed under the Act and who are not elected members of the council do not generally have voting rights, with some exceptions such as advisory committees. Section 13.1 of the Act says that a co-opted member of a committee established under the Act must be a non-voting member. However, section 102 of the Act stipulates that a committee which discharges a function can include co-opted members, and except where it's a committee set up to regulate and control the finance of the local authority. And in their view, it's that where an audit committee such as governance committee is operating as an advisory committee, making recommendations rather than policy, then all members of the committee should be able to vote on those recommendations. It does depend on how much delegated authority is given to each of the governance committees. CIPFA's recommendation, therefore, is that a committee such as a governance committee, like ourselves, would be considered both as advisory and non-advisory, because obviously you do consider some of the financial matters of the council, and therefore any independent member should not have a vote on any matter which involves the control or regulation of council finances, and therefore such a restriction on that basis would need to be reflected in the constitution if there were a co-opted member to come on board. Yeah, that sets out the background and obviously the piece of work that's been carried out by the partnership, and it's for committee to consider the recommendations in 2.1 to 2.3 if you would like to appoint a co-opted independent member to the governance committee, and if you do so, then to recommend to full council and recommend to full council that a separate report setting out the required changes to the constitution be considered at the next full council to make those changes to the constitution for the governance committee. And then subject to those two recommendations, that the change to the members' allowances be inclusive of a £200 remuneration for the co-opted member.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Just a couple of comments, I think. One, I'll ask a question to our auditor. Do you think £200, I know that's been set by a full meeting, do you think that would be sufficient to attract?
So we do have half a dozen applicants who we think are suitable. There needs to be a process to interview them and select them. I suspect that they are not doing it for monetary value, but for the rest of the voluntary side of things. So they're not doing it for the money.
And do you think mileage allowance is something that is allowable or the external something for us to consider in the future?
Would be a question, sorry, Chair.
Do you think a mileage allowance is something that can be attached to this issue?
I mean, that would be something that we could put to the independent remuneration panel.
Right. Well,
We would have to,
we'll see what comes back. I mean, I'm jumping to John here.
but we would have to be guided by their recommendations.
I think you've already asked a question, and people might show interest.
So we have passed one CV to Straits who lives locally.
All right.
So we would be looking at to appoint people who live locally to the area. So
And can I just clarify 4.11? Being councillor or officer of any of the councils, is that all our parish councils or any council that is?
That would be of any of the council. So this is obviously a copy that went out in the advert.
Right.
So obviously that
It's
included
generic.
4 or 5 of the Devon councils. So I think this is saying is not be a councillor or officer of any of those councils. So it's those Devon authorities that the independent co-opted member would represent.
Thank you very much. I think that was my points. My vice chair.
You say that you had some applicants already. I mean, how would we do processing? Who would become a member? Who would be basically making that decision? Would it be us as a committee, or would it be down to the officers?
The recruitment would be carried out through Devon Wood Partnership, but obviously with as pointed out, obviously he's passed across a copy of a CV of one of the applicants who's coming from North Devon for you to have a look at, just to see obviously his background and relevance to the role. So the actual appointment of the co-opted members would obviously be done through Devon Wood Partnership, but obviously it makes sense that if you've got somebody who's appropriately qualified who lives in North Devon to become the representative that supports the North Devon. But the idea behind it is that they would support those councils. So I think if the member from North Devon, then obviously there's a pool of members there that potentially could become that independent property member.
Councillor Davies. Joe. I'm thinking Wales, I'm thinking.
Sorry, Chair, I just add to what I just said as well. So obviously, once that person was obviously being recruited, then we would need to go to full council for the formal appointment. So that would enable that person looking to get.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, just 2 points, just for clarification, the term council was used, so they can't have any association with councils. We're just defining, we're saying that would just be, that would be this council? And would that also extend to, for example, parish and town councils?
Because obviously they're coming onto the governance committee of this council.
Yeah.
So therefore, they mustn't be a council or officer of this council.
Okay.
So it says councils in the report because obviously this report was going to
Northern
down
council.
councils.
Okay, I didn't clarify. And then secondly, there was mention that this had been, this has been happening already in Torres District Council for some time. And I was just wondering if our chief executive, having had a history of working with those councils, could endorse the benefit of having an additional member of the public joining us, and you don't have to answer. You may have just answered.
Some positives maybe, some positives.
I mean, the report sets out the reasoning behind it, to increase transparency, to increase independence. Playing devil's advocate, I've not noticed a lack of independence amongst this committee or a lack of willingness to challenge on issues. So I, you know, we've got that in spades on this committee anyway, but an independent member does provide that non-elected look at the council, if you like. Yes, I have had experience at the council of working with independent members on the committees. I think the success of it very much depends on the individuals that are appointed. I've had mixed experience of it, to be totally honest, but that is down to the individuals that are appointed. So if there's a careful recruitment process, which I'm sure there will be through Devon Audit Partnership, with members appointing the final individual to the committee, then that should hopefully reduce that risk.
Thank you.
Unfair question then.
So I just want to ask you to turn the length of the appointment.
Good question. Shall I say it?
It would be included in your constitution, so it would be ongoing, Chair.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
What was the answer, sir?
Ongoing.
Unless the individual obviously decided that they didn't do it anymore, then obviously we would need to take a further report back to full council to appoint a new independent member. Providing they're willing to continue, it would be an ongoing term.
Forever.
Well, obviously in line with the constitution, so obviously it won't change.
Well, I mean, it's, if as a council, we decide we didn't like that arrangement, then you can always change the constitution again to remove that. Bearing in mind that the guidance certainly from SIP.
Personally, I think, you know, we have got a well-balanced committee here. That welcome and independent, those recommendations. Councillor Bishop.
Yeah, I had 3 questions, but obviously I'm trying to clear up the whole voting thing because I was going to ask for some elaboration. It's very good at reading our minds, isn't it? If a member is co-opted, how do we know they're going to turn up? Is there a way of compelling to make sure that there has to be an independent?
Is a solution perhaps that we similar to the council, so meetings and they are, yeah, 6 months, they can be removed from council.
We could introduce that, I don't know if other councils are considering that, but if they're non-voting members, then I suspect that they could be permitted to attend virtually if need be. I don't know if other councils are thinking about that, because the restriction on attending virtually is you're not allowed to vote If they're non-voting
Yes.
members, then presumably they could do that. That's something we could look at. But I'm not, there is no provision that says that we have to force them to attend.
I was looking at the sort of best value and equally councillor Hayward, who made a good point that we could appoint somebody, then never come to a meeting, and then 35 years later, they're still in post because we've forgotten they're supposed to be turning up because they've never turned up, and they're taking their allowance and not performing their duty. So I think we were both of the same mindedness, and also there are politicians who change the rules so they can stay in a particular seat, so they can't be ousted as a leader of a government or something like that.
Chair, what we can do is look to potentially do a term. So we have a similar arrangement with the Harp Board, where we have co-opted independent members on the Harp Board. We'll have a look at the arrangements for those. But as I say, we can always build a term in, so they're obviously appointed for the period. Again, maybe reappoint them again after that term if you're happy with the
I
arrangement.
think that would satisfy me. And you got 5 questions.
Yeah, my second question is there's no mention of their political affiliations. Would they?
It says independence.
There must be independent, can't be non-profit.
Oh, not, yeah.
I thought you were just flattering us. I was just going to ask whether they would be bound by the same rules of engagement as our officers, where even, obviously they will have their beliefs politically, but they wouldn't be guided by those beliefs specifically in council, because I thought that might, as we have a balanced committee of the various elected members, that could upset the balance. I mean, I don't mind people having their own views.
But I think you're saying it's non-voting anyway.
But they're non-voting and they're independent.
Yes.
How does that affect the balance for the independent members on this?
They're independent, not independent.
Yeah.
Independent spread.
I think we are. Councillor Jones.
I will carry on with the previous point. No, it does flag some areas for just confusion, because they're not an employee, but then they're not necessarily under the same regulations. So that all just needs clarifying, doesn't it? Don't say that has to happen right now, but it needs to be clear that they have a set of responsibilities. If they don't follow those responsibilities, how can we remove them from that post? Is there something set out that allows that to happen? In the same sense that if they don't turn up or they're disruptive or something like this, do we have the means? Is something in that contract? Is there some kind of contract that gives us the
If you found the arrangement wasn't working for the council, then you could revisit that arrangement and remove it from the constitution and no longer have a non-elected member on the committee.
I think you're talking about circumstances with a particular individual, if something doesn't work out. In the same way that you can have an employee contract with an employee.
Yeah.
The appointment of the individual would go to full council.
Yeah.
So again, if you were not happy with the appointment or the performance of the individual, then quite rightly you could go to full council to remove the appointment of that.
We've got 2 options. One is change the constitution. 2 is going to
But they're not an employee, so they wouldn't fall under the same regulations as an employee.
They would be, in general parlance, they're called independent members, but that can be confused with, as you say, the independent group.
We were trying to find someone else to bring to the group.
Right, okay.
So it's probably safe to call them a non-elected member. They wouldn't be an employee. They would come onto the committee. They just provide independent challenge. But you can bring that arrangement to an end. You could bring the arrangement to that individual to an end, as John said.
Can we propose that the term is changed then to non-elected as opposed to independent, just to save the confusion I had earlier this afternoon?
Say that again.
Non-elected as opposed to independent.
Classified as a co-opted independent.
Yeah, so I think it's. I think we can revisit it.
I think that outlining their roles, expectations, I think maybe Nikki's, she's nodding. She understands exactly what Councillor Jones is saying, is that they must maybe not use profane language in the meeting. That might be something.
I'm going to say they will still be subject to the same code of conduct as councillors are. So yeah. I mean,
And we can put the word apolitical, their views expressed in the meeting.
I think we leave it down to the auditors and process, so that's right.
Yeah, I think a lot of these will need to be, we'll need to refine what they are. I mean, most people being members of professional bodies who are governed by their professional ethics and so on. But my personal view is, I thought audit committee at any time could say we're not happy with this individual. Please can we cease that arrangement? So that's what I would think personally, that we need to sort of bottom out what the contracts is one with them is.
That again gives a danger that they might be afraid to say what they want to say because the committee could just say, you're not coming back to the next meeting. And again, that's not fair, is it? If we shouldn't kick somebody out because we don't agree with their views that they've had, because their views are worth bringing to the table.
But never mind, so conduct.
Can we talk to the chair, please?
Chair, the terms of reference, obviously the constitution will need to be amended, and obviously the terms of reference around the appointment of that co-opted independent member will be also clear in the constitution. So I think some of that criteria will lay out in the constitution changes, which again will come through members at full council for approval at the next full council meeting.
There's a lot of discussion about concerns to them rather than what they can bring and the advantages when they can. Can we move on to a proposal to set the start with 2.1? We have to members determine if they would like to appoint a co-opted independent member to the governance committee, and if so, to recommend to full council that is to do so. Proposal, secretary, all agreement. Okay. So next is, I think it's 2.2 and 2.3 together. If members approve 2.1 above, for a separate report setting out the requirements changes to part 3 annex, blah, blah, blah. Paragraph 5, the constitution be considered that it's full council. So we got one first away. Subject 2.1 and 2.2. It's on block and subject 2.1, 2.2 above the council. You recommend to amend the scheme of members' allowances 23, 24, 25. Proposing. Seconder. All agreements. Stay. Right. Good. Thank you very much indeed. We're moving on to 12 role of lead members. Page 97 down to 4.
Thank you, Chair. Annual council is meeting in May 23, appointed 6 councillors as lead members. To act as an advocate or spokesperson for a specific area of the council. The expectation of a lead member is currently not clearly defined. A draft lead member protocol has been set out for you in Appendix A to add this definition, which include that lead members will actively contribute to policies, budgets and service delivery, the areas they lead, consult and communicate with members, officers and key partners to ensure decisions are well informed and then promoted, provide full council with an annual report on their work and performance. In return, the council will designate a lead officer to support each lead member, ensure the lead members have the necessary training they require, and to take the appropriate action to promote the lead member role and ensure they are correctly consulted on matters relating to their interests. This committee has been asked to recommend to full council that the lead member protocol is adopted and incorporated within Part 7 of the council's constitution. Habilitation.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor and Councillor.
Yeah, I'd like that the officer that is appointed to them, if we go with this recommendation, is allowed to report back to this committee. And if they wish to speak, then that lead member would perhaps not be in the room, just in case there are difficulties of the dynamic between our staff and the lead member. And as governments, that would be where you'd expect them to come anyway.
Can you have that?
Well, it's very, I don't know, it's very broad. If the officer feels that they're doing all of the work and the league member isn't supporting them, they might want to come to governments and say this, or they could say, well, I feel like they won't reply to any of my emails, and I'm offended by that. They would come back to governments because we're doing the performance monitoring of that. I don't, Nikki perhaps has other suggestions of scenarios where the officer attached to that lead member might want to report without the lead member being there, so we could review his application.
Councillor Walker, then we'll pick up that one, Councillor Walker.
I just want to say that I really welcome this piece of work and see it put into the into part of the constitution. It's very difficult to put yourself forward as a lead member if you're not sure what is expected of you. And I'm not talking about the specifics of individual lead members, but a lead member role. And I think this lays it out extremely well. And just to respond to Councillor Bushel's comment about officers being able to come forward to governance committee, I should hope that our officers who work extremely hard with the lead members, if they find that they have a lead member who isn't working for them, will bring it to the leader of the council well before they felt they need to bring it to governance.
Yeah. Okay. Can I speak back from one of the other lead members? I didn't ask their permission, so I won't say the name. But they said this is a statutory useful document, really helps me in my role, similar to what Councillor Walker was saying. So, because I did circulate this to all lead members, this case it's been spotted. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, it's something that we've already discussed in detail earlier today. I've been asked to bring this forward by the leader of our group, specifically at this point, in relation to concern over lead members also being chairs and vice chair. There's an understanding that because of that, there's a restriction for those members to then be members of Strategy and Resource Committee, which in turn creates a challenge for council to bring concerns, raise questions to those lead members, and for those lead members to effectively report back on the basis that they are not members of Strategy and Resource. There's a few points here. One of those points, firstly, is it actually correct that a lead member who is chair or vice chair cannot be on the Strategy and Resource Committee? And I understand already that you'd like to put forward a proposal that you'd like to discuss this with the leaders of the groups, along with the appropriate officers, to go away and have further discussion about this.
Just to clarify, to my knowledge, lead members can be on statutory resources. Councillor Knight is on them. And there's nothing currently in the constitution.
Chair.
Oh, chairs.
Can be on
Chairs
Strategy and Resource. Yeah.
Yes, there's nothing.
Sorry, chair of the council and vice chair of the council.
There's nothing, I believe, to prevent them being on statutory resources or any other committee. Currently.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, Strategy and Resources if you're chair or vice chair of the council.
Oh, no, I did look for it.
No,
Or a member of government.
So what I'm proposing is I'll initially discuss this with, I'm having conversations with the leader, initially with the leader and the government and perhaps the advisor on this. And then I'll have a discussion with perhaps the full council or the lead group members.
I think it's really important that those discussions include the leaders of the groups.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to the leader of the members, is happy to start discussions with the lead argument.
Chair, sorry, can I just
Yes.
say something? Because I actually do feel that this is a personal attack against me. Because for the last 4 years previous to this administration, the chair of governance was a lead member. The chair of governance cannot be on Strategy and Resources by the very note that they are on governance. It was brought up, I was actually asked a question directly, what qualifications do I have to be the lead member that I was, which I was told by the chair at the time I didn't need to answer, I did. And it just seems very strange to me that this is coming up, in this administration, time and time again, when in previous administrations, it has been seen as being perfectly okay to have a lead member in any area who, for reason of them being, having another role within the council, cannot sit on strategy and resources. Now, I totally agree that lead members, whenever they are able, in the same way as any other councillor, should attend strategy and resources meetings, as I do when it's available to do so. The fact that they are on Monday mornings sometimes means there's a couple of times a year I may not be able to. But it does feel as if this administration has suddenly decided they want to change the goalposts and make it so all lead members have to sit on strategy and resources, which have not come from the leader of the administration.
It's not official on the agenda here, but I'll just take two comments and then we'll.
Can I just respond and just say, from my perspective, absolutely, this is not personal to you whatsoever. This is not political. And I had that conversation in depth, and it is just, it's strongly the feeling that, and this really is not personal, it's strongly the feeling that if those individuals are representing those areas, then strategy and resource gives the correct platform for question and feedback to happen.
What happens with it in the last administration when exactly the same position happened?
Okay. Yeah, last question. We'll answer your question in a moment, but.
Yeah, you said that initially you kicked the meetings off with Adam and the leader. I think it's very important, bearing in mind this is coming from governance, that you involve all of the different leaders, the group leaders.
That's fine. That's also been agreed, if that's what you want. I've thought this through and that will be agreed.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And we'll take on board Councillor Walker's comments as well. But please, any other questions? Oh, sorry, choose any.
I just wanted some clarity really, because I know when we discussed the appointment of one lead member role, I think it was the last full council time before, I can't remember which now. There were some concerns raised by the group leader of the independent group around the potential conflict between the role of a lead member and the role of chair of council, because we were appointing the chair of council as lead member. I think what's being expressed tonight is slightly different, which is slightly beyond that, which is the potential to have a change in the constitution to require lead members to sit on strategy and resources committee. And that is something that we've not really discussed as such. I think the conflict between lead member role and chair or vice chair of council role is something that we should perhaps explore a little bit. And that's not a personal issue, that is just a conflict between those two particular roles. And how it was described at full council was, if full council is discussing something about that particular subject matter, and the lead member of that subject matter is the chair of council, how would they deal with that? How would they control the meeting and so on? And I think that's something that we should explore probably.
Yes, we discuss.
But if the requirement now, or if the suggestion is now that the constitution be changed so that lead members all sit on strategy and resources, Councillor Walker is absolutely correct that in the past we've always taken the view that's not necessary. But if that is the suggestion now, then that is something that we need to have a wider debate with group leaders about.
To clarify, it's dialogue, I think. Yeah, I'm not saying there's no fixed agenda. It's just, I think sort of the leader in independence felt that all lead officers lead councillors should be part of strategy resources.
Yeah.
This paper we've got in front of us says that they can attend, not be a voting member. So it's just looking to see what is appropriate, really.
And that has been suggested in the past, but members have decided not to go with that requirement. But it would be useful probably for Adam, I would thought, to know whether the rest of this report and the rest of the requirements are acceptable.
Yeah.
Are we going along the right lines with this? And are members' concerns just limited to that conflict between the lead member role and chair and vice chair of council role, and also now this provision about whether they should sit on strategy resources? If everything else looks okay,
Yeah.
then we're nearly there and we can have that discussion about those two items.
That's done.
Thank you for articulating my
Yeah.
points better than I did. And that is very much the case. Can we ask that they are put on a future agenda to be discussed in more detail?
Let's have the dialogue first. You might find all the group leaders agree it.
Well, I think even if the group leaders agree, then it's appropriate to have it in the agenda for that to be fed back to us.
Yes.
It would have to come back because that, if there's a requirement that lead members sit on Stratton Resources, then we will have to change the constitution to make that provision. So that would come to you as governance committee and then on to
Full council.
Can I move that we support what's being put forward?
The report.
The
The
report.
report, yes. The second thing. All agree.
We're in principle, what,
Well, subject to
taking
the.
subject to your.
Yes, yes. I think what they're saying is this one.
They're slightly separate points. They need to be considered.
Yeah. All
It's,
agree.
it's not a bad report, just.
Thank you. Okay, so we progress this. All agreement. Okay.
It just very strange.
Got to the time. So agenda item 13, internal audit.
Yeah, so this is, the DAP paper for you. Starting on page 107, so we're looking at reasonable assurance opinion for the year. That's consistent with most of our other partners. So details of the audits delivered are so there's further detail in appendix 1, which is on page 110. But just some comments from me about the work undertaken. So I just going down this council tax, yes, quite impressed with the arrangements there. A high rate of collection is being maintained. Appropriate action is being taken to chase unpaid council tax, but also to return money to the individual where appropriate. Also note the reasonable assurance opinion for debt management. So we previously provided 2 limited reports in that area, but obviously a lot of effort being taken by officers to identify debt and chase and manage it systematically. You've seen big debt reductions in some service areas and more debt is being written off. So again, it's a much improved picture to reasonable assurance. We also provided a summary on the improvements to performance management. So obviously there's a lot more focus on performance indicators. Just generally think that more public reporting is needed on how the council is delivering. That's what we think is currently missing in that area. Tarka Leisure Centre, we followed up our work last year. Obviously it's a new contract, with a leisure provider. So we think there's appropriate action is being taken to ensure longer term monitoring and management of the contractor. Equality and diversity. Again, that's an improvement from our previous limited report. So it's now a reasonable. Much more information is being provided on the makeup of the local population. Just more work is needed on internal staff and the protective characteristics, so that you can compare one to the other and say, do we have a diverse workforce or not? Learning and development, again, so the introduction of iTrent is going to have a big impact on the learning and development module, which will enable the council to identify the training people are undertaking, whether they're doing their mandatory training, for instance. And then finally, we provide a report on North Devon Plus, which is a company owned by Torridge and North Devon. We think it's a good partnership that's going to encourage and support those companies in the area and covering its costs. So the council are putting in quite a small amount of money and it's getting a good benefit. So that's a brief canter through of the report. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I think it's credit to the officers again. Straight to answer, Rick.
No, just to, I say, reaffirm what's been said, that it's positive. There have been a couple of reports that were limited previously that
Yeah.
have come through as
Yeah.
reasonable assurance, and a significant amount of work's been done through Adam and the team to improve that performance. So I think it's a positive report, and obviously contributes with our annual report that will come at one of the next meetings.
Thank you. Right, thank you again. And I have 2-minute coffee break. Do we need to vote on this? I got to have one anyway. Adjourn for 5 minutes, is that all right?
You're just gonna suck your thumb, yeah, for 5 minutes?
No, my kidney needs to be sorted. Right. The program license to push through. Holland District Review, pages 117 to 140.
Yep, that's me again,
Thank
Chair.
you.
This committee at the September meeting agreed to start the statutory review of polling districts and places within North Devon. That consultation has now taken place and the proposed arrangements for the polling districts and places have been set out in Appendix A. There are just 3 updates to make members aware of. At Brighington Arms at Knoll, whilst there has been some uncertainty of the ownership of that facility, current communications are indicating that it will be available again to the polling station, which is a preference. The best alternative would be the Church or Christchurch at Braunton, although this is outside the polling district of Knoll. So we'll keep that situation under review. The second change is that South Molton has been split into 2 polling districts. And finally, St John's Community Centre in Barnstable, again, there's concerns over the current availability of that as a polling station due to the condition of the roof. Again, we are in discussions with Barnstable Town Council to monitor that situation. So that's the amendments to the report. The Governance Committee has been asked to recommend full council that the arrangements in Appendix A are approved.
Thank you. Councillor Phil and Councillor Walker.
I think that I misinterpreted an email, because we each as ward members got an idea of how they were split. And I assumed-
Seth Knowlton, did you clarify?
So South Molton was split
Yes.
essentially right down the middle. It was a very straight line. And I wondered how we were going to split 3 seats into those 2, but it's merely which polling station that people are going to, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's the good one, these seats.
No, nothing changed to South Molton, so I have no opinion. It's using the same,
Thank you.
it's all we've used.
Councillor, I think your co-councillor is also very happy with it.
Oh, hang on.
Yes.
I do apologise. There were people at the last election from Mill on the Mole who had to walk to the Methodist Church, and they asked why they weren't polling in the Amory Centre when it was actually closer to Mill on the Mole.
Again, that's a
Boundary.
boundary issue rather than at this stage, just looking at the polling district polling stations. That is an issue that can be picked up under the community government's reports when they take place.
I know it was merely that they have to walk further to get to the Methodist Church.
It's not the only one, Councillor Shaw, it's one in my area as well.
Okay.
It's, but there, in the future date, there will be, or there will be a review of polling areas sometime in the future, possibly.
There may well be, yeah, after whenever the general election is.
Yeah, that's
but
exactly what, no, I don't think there was one before.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
No.
There isn't any way that we can just.
But the Mill on the Mole was a change that was introduced at the last review, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, we added them in. It was just whether they could.
Ordinarily, the polling stations, we try and get the polling stations within the polling districts. Which is why perhaps there are sometimes an anomaly in that an adjoining polling district may have a polling station which is geographically closer to an individual's property than the one that they have to vote in. I've got that in my own, vote. But it's because the polling stations, we tend to restrict those to the polling district. And Adam's already highlighted a couple of cases where we've not been able to do that because there aren't any suitable locations. But it does happen that sometimes people have to travel a little bit further than their nearest polling station to go to one that they're allocated.
I do feel for the people on the Mole, because they're at the bottom of the hill and the Methodist Church is at the top of the hill. So they have got to you know, it's not an easy.
But I think that wasn't the scope of this really. This is more about the godliness of the station, isn't it? More than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I haven't noted one.
We do actually have, one of our polling stations is actually not in our polling district, but it's, you think it was, but it's not. And half of it's your polling station, so we share it.
Oh, the Tesco's.
Yeah, Sainsbury's.
Sainsbury's, yeah.
What happens, you've put down about St John's Community Centre may not be available due to the state of the roof. The Tomlin Hall is in the same position.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, because I think we have gone out and approached the property,
Yeah.
so we weren't made aware of that.
I'm surprised because the planning's gone through for the new roof, so hopefully by the time we get an election, the roof will have been replaced, but at the moment, it may be you get to say, oh, there's an election, and you come along and find that there's a building which got no roof because it's been replaced.
I think that might be, there are options in terms of cabinets.
And it is nice to see that we've got our garage now in Stillness.
So we'll leave that to the election team to look at. Can I have a proposal for? Yes. Seconder. All in favour? Excellent, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the comments attached. Right, then item 15, relocation policy, head of organisational development.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, so the report today is to bring to members with regard to the reintroduction of the relocation policy. Many years ago, we had a relocation policy that was in place through the Personnel Committee as it was then. Relocation was suspended because we weren't having any particular recruitment difficulties at that time. And so it was felt that it was an appropriate time to suspend, but on the understanding that if things became a little bit more challenging for us, or if we felt we needed something else to add to our overall sort of recruitment package to enable us to attract people to North Devon, that we could reintroduce it. Obviously, it was a personnel committee decision, and so that's why I'm bringing it back to members today to discuss the possibility of reinstatement of the relocation policy. The policy, which I know you've all seen, basically it's just been revised from how it was written previously to bring it into line with the HMRC regulations, to make sure we've covered everything off. The policy, likewise, there is one other area which I've subsequently discovered which would fall under the guidelines and terms, and that is in relation to somebody would have to leave their property fully. You couldn't maintain one property and move down here without being incorporated alongside the regulations. So that would be added in. The reality is that the policy, depending on if we give support today, we still haven't taken it to our workforce matters, which is our trade union consultative body. It would need to go there for sign off. But the recommendation today, basically, to help us to attract people to our hard to fill vacancies, we've already touched on different elements and some being a little bit more difficult than others. And not so very long ago, we had a look at a report with regard to agency spend and so on and so forth. This is just another element that we could potentially add to all of it. Make our as most attractive as we possibly could. And relocation to this area, if we can offer an element of relocation, then it's another string to our bow, and it would hopefully help to enable people to relocate to the area, which, as we know, is a relatively high cost housing area. Historically, we used to have a relocation policy that would be deployed across the board. We're not suggesting that. What we're saying is that it would very much be done on the basis of where we know we've got particular difficulties. Decisions would be taken at the point when we decide if we would or would not decide to apply a relocation package. It also means that we're in line with our neighbouring authority, who also on something very similar. And so my request really is that the governance committee members support the reintroduction of that relocation.
Thank you. Personally, I think it's a great idea. I think we've, especially with those I mentioned in the past, we've struggled to get staff. Some positions, this could be, some used to go with the handshakes, don't they? I've personally benefited twice, relocation packages in my lifetime, but as a council employee, I'm pleased it's not just for every. Questions, councillor.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the legalities, so I'm glad that we've got you to make sure that this organisation doesn't fall foul, because I definitely know of people whose one person stays with the family, the other one relocates, and I don't know how that would apply, but I'm sure that you'll apply in a way that we aren't at risk. I'd also like to say that I think it's a good idea, especially with particular departments and trying to get, I would guess, senior members. Once you've been in a role for one organisation for a long time, you're less likely to move. You need a sweetener to be able to move. But thinking of the past history, is there a way that if somebody in their interview process says to us, I will relocate to North Devon, that is a factor within their contract, so they can't commute, because it's very tiring if you're commuting. I mean, I think it's normal for people to commute for a head of service job within this country, that they could be driving 4 hours for their commute, and that's very tiring. So if somebody in their process says, I will relocate, that they actually need to relocate.
Yeah, yes, within the guidelines and the terms of the policy, we've tried very hard to capture that, in as much as, if you accept an offer with us, there are expectations. We do expect you to fully relocate. We do expect that to happen in the 12-month period. We're looking at if you're in a place of work, your location within 20 miles of the place of work. So we're looking at people could relocate, but then they're still 20 miles away, but then could still be 50, 60, 70 miles away. So we've tried very hard in the policy to capture all of those things, and there are the caveats. And going back to your earlier point, you wouldn't expect if a couple were moving and one member of that couple was receiving relocation benefits from a different source, we wouldn't double pay, if that makes sense. And again, the policy makes it very clear that if you cannot accept from 2 different sources, be that government or however it may have happened, you have to only claim it once. And likewise, there are some caveats in there in terms of if you join us and then you decide to leave, some of that relocation package would be payable. We've tried to build in an element of flexibility, because for anyone relocated to an area, some things might be more beneficial to them than other things. So we're basically saying we will pay up to a maximum of £8,000. That doesn't mean to say that is a given, but we will pay up to as a maximum, but they might choose to use it in all of the ways that have been explained within the policy.
And they need to justify all of the payment.
Yeah, they still need to provide receipts for anything that's happened.
And can I seek clarification? Your 20 miles sounds like a really good idea, but there might be areas of North Devon which are further away than 20 miles from this office. Is it 20 miles from their standard base of operation, or is it within 20 miles of the North Devon area? Because I think it's very important that it's within North Devon.
Place of work is what we're, sorry, Chair, place of work is what we indicate within the.
Councillor Jones, somebody who lived near Councillor Jones wouldn't be within 20 miles of the authority, and he manages a commute in here for meetings. So I wonder whether we just say within the North Devon area, as in, within the district.
Can we leave it down to the chief? I mean, we're going to empower the chief executive to make these decisions. I
was just pointing out the anomaly that Brackenford is a lovely place to live.
Yeah.
And somebody might want to live there.
And this is just in relation to the ability to access the relocation package. It doesn't mean to say that we will not employ somebody that lives in Brackenford because they're more than 20 miles away from the office.
Yeah.
And nor does it mean that, you know, we're imposing a requirement that everybody has to live within 20 miles of the place of work. This is just to access the relocation. So all we're saying is, you know, if you live more than 50 miles away and you're coming within 20 miles, you can benefit from this.
Do I need to disclose an interest then, because I live within 20 miles of here?
You're not
So people that may get that £8,000 and move to South Molten, whereas they can't move to Bradford.
Yeah. But unfortunately, you can't apply for any jobs.
To be honest, I've already got the best people from South Molten to work for the authority.
Just seeking a little bit of clarity. So my understanding is that this will be reserved for particular roles where we are most in need. Does it also apply across the pay levels and experience levels? So for example, if you were looking to recruit an apprentice into planning, would that still be eligible to, for example, a more junior role? Or would it only apply to certain levels?
I think as the chair alluded to, the decision in terms of when it would or wouldn't apply would be a delegated decision to the I don't think there is an intention to say you have to be earning over a certain amount of money to be able to type of relocation. If there are posts that we have had difficulty filling, we know building environmental health planning in some instances, you know, we would consider that, but a decision would be taken on the appropriate post to apply the relocation.
Yeah, same reason.
Somebody who's working for building,
Go to the chair.
which makes South Molten could live in Bradford.
Yeah, because that place of work is different to, but Nikki's absolutely right that the criteria will be around how difficult we found it to recruit, and that could be at any level.
I mean, there are some positions where you just get one off, you know, one person in that role, then that's fine.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I can fill those particular posts, it will be a little management. But, proposal. Who's first? Second. Councillor Walker. All in agreement? Good.
Thanks.
Thank you for the great
Thank you,
report.
Chair.
Thank you.
Just to clarify that now that, thank you for your support, I appreciate that. This report now will go through our normal internal process,
Yes.
and go to workable matters, well, that will be the sort of final sign off. But I appreciate your support.
And is that also the unions then as well?
That is the union, workforce matters, sorry, is our.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good,
thank you.
Thank you.
We're moving on to 16 audit recommendation tracker, pages 151.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious that we're approaching the bewitching hour of three-hour resolution. I'll just focus on, right, you've got Appendix B, it's a normal report that you get. Appendix B shows the actions that have been completed. Appendix C is the one that usually attracts the most debate, which is the overdue actions where an extension of time has been requested. And you'll see that there are two actions on there. The first is around ranking those top 5 services where we've got contracts in place and making sure we've got continuity arrangements. And you'll see that at the moment we're on progress of 90%, so we're nearly there. We just need to finalise the final steps, and we're looking for an extension to the 31st of March, a couple of months. And the second one is around the reconciliations, and we're looking for an extension to the 30th of April, just to put the arrangements in place with Silica. And those are the two actions under table Appendix C. Thank you.
Perhaps when we have our shares meeting, I'd like to discuss some of these quite old 2021 actions. See what's really best reports this committee, and some of them are dragging on, but I don't know. On this report, I want to tell if they are high, medium, or risk, high, medium, or low items for this. That's trigger, also trigger looking at the.
Which appendix, Chair?
Items.
Appendix A.
Appendix A, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Because we're now in 2024, and this report doesn't really give us the detail.
Yeah, the,
Oh, I see, yeah.
yeah, appendix A gives the, obviously, the live definition, obviously, some of them have, sort of no risks outstanding. So obviously, it shows them still as outstanding on there, but obviously, the majority say they would all be complete, still, wouldn't they? Because obviously a lot of them.
I don't know if these are now, so perhaps just sort of, alleviating concerns councillor might have, we look at the older ones.
Depends on when the target dates for completion are on those.
Yes.
Some of them maybe, obviously, if they're not coming out in appendix C.
Yeah.
Then they obviously have dates in the future.
Yeah, it looks like a long time, we're 2024 and not 20. I'll listen to the next slide, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can I have a proposer?
I've been trying not to say anything, but I do live in hope. That's one meeting we won't have. I risk things coming back for extensions and we will prioritise them. I shall leave it at that.
Yes.
And
I think we are seeing improvements.
like you, I tire of seeing.
Second. All in favour? Exception.
I'm very much not in favour of accepting them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Russ, indeed. Thank you. Moving quickly on to 17 work programme. I think it's paid for information, really, isn't it? Yeah, don't you agree? So I think we, hoping well, next meeting we'll have.
Just to confirm, item 10 today will go on to the.
Yes, yeah. And next meeting we'll have business continuity, I think,
Yeah.
because there are some outstanding audits.
Yeah, that was dropped
Yeah.
in this meeting.
Yes.
Because of the length of the agenda.
Yes, that was it. Thank you. So that's just a note.
When are we hearing back from strategy? Is that the next meeting?
Yeah, back.
About the planning stuff, is that coming back next meeting?
No, your amendment wasn't seconded.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that disappears, or can I request that it comes back to next meeting?
It wasn't seconded.
It wasn't just.
No, at this point, while we're considering the works programme, I'd propose that we get back.
You didn't get support that time, I think it's support this time.
Well, I'm only asking for it to come back to us after it's been to strategy, that might have support, it was a very different amendment before.
Can I suggest we see what comes out of that report, then you ask to. I don't want to spend 10 minutes.
For it to come back to the next meeting.
John,
I mean, obviously the resolution or the request to put forward obviously wasn't seconded, so there's, in a sense, there's nothing to go to strategy resources from governance.
Sure.
The report itself will go to governance, to go to strategy and resources. In February, it will then go on to policy and it will then go on to full council as normal. But there is nothing to raise at strategy and resources because there's no resolution from your committee to go to them.
so Councillor Shaw, the opportunity to raise as a full council of wishes.
Or strategy and resources.
Yeah.
Or policy. I'll catch it at policy.
Right. We're going now on to the summary, so number 18. So 18, yeah, 18. Following audits, observations, internal audits, we felt we should be more transparent in our risk register. The first step, we're just listing the current risks in part A. We'll have dialogue in part B, but maybe in the future we can review if we can be more transparent in part A. But there's quite a bit of confidential actions within the administration. So just to note this one. Okay, then moving on to, I need a proposal second, isn't it? Proposer, Councillor Shaw, seconder. Mark, good. Right, part B.
Thank you. The corporate risk management group called lead met on the 1st of December.
Just need to make a resolution to go and move into part B.
I think that's what we were doing.
Oh, is all you're doing?
Yeah.
Sorry.